publications we have to make in order to survive. Administrative contributions we have to make because our respective institutions expect us to contribute. And yes, guiding research, participating in scholarly programs like this, they're also part of our duty. But most important thing is we're all teachers, and the most loved thing in our life is learning from each other. So I express my gratitude to Professor Dwivedi for giving me this opportunity to connect to friends from across the country in a very important program organized by Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IT, Tirupati. Well, to begin with, all of us, when we talk about communication skill, we must be aware that there are 4 core skills that are very, very important: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And friends, you might also agree that these skills appear in the same order, and hierarchically, it is a movement from simplicity to the greater level of difficulty. So while listening is supposed to be the easiest one, going by that hierarchy, writing is supposed to be the most difficult one. I don't know how many of you have realized that, but yes, when we start writing, then we realize how difficult it is to write something. Now, we'll be beginning to talk about process of writing, because believe me, friends, if you want to be professionally successful, well, I don't negate the other skills of communication like listening, speaking, and reading, but writing is what keeps you in shape. Writing is what makes your reputation. Unfortunately, we have many wonderful speakers, but we can count only a few accomplished writers in the real sense. So that also points to the fact that writing is one of the most difficult skills to master. Well, if you look around, you will find that the people who can speak well and at the same time can write effectively are the people in demand. And again, I mean, there is no competition between speaking and writing because they complement each other, but still writing has certain privileges which speaking may not have. Well, if we look at the history of the world, what survives the ravages of time is what has been written, what has been preserved. Fine? So when there was fall of Constantinople at the hands of Turks in 1453, and the libraries were set on fire, a lot of age-old wisdom of Greek civilization got lost. But whatever the scholars of that time could salvage and run away with, who took shelter in Rome, well, all that they could salvage, all those treatises that were available in written form, half burnt or half moth-eaten, but they still, preserved them, and whatever they preserved became the basis of modern day knowledge system. So that is how we know about Aristotle, we know about Plato, we know about Socrates, and we know about many people. If Shakespeare survives today, maybe after 400 years of his death, or more than 400 years of his death, it is not through what he has spoken, but what has been documented in the form of writing. So we all know that writing is very, very important. But believe me, I believe in the power of spoken, communication as well. I compliment Professor Dwivedi for organizing a program on academic and research writing. All of us belong to academics, and for us to survive, there is a very famous saying, publish or perish. If you don't publish, you don't exist in academics. Although we had wonderful teachers in the past who did not publish a single leaflet, they continued to be rated as the stalwarts of their profession, the greatest of teachers. But how unfortunate, although they were greatest and their reputations added to their disciples, unfortunately, the future generations could not take advantage of their wisdom because there was nothing in writing. Had there been something written by them in the written form, had it been published somewhere, I guess the future generations could have benefited more. So it's so important. But let us think for a while. How does it happen? And how seriously do we take the act of writing? Do you think writing happens just like that, automatically? Yes? Any of you?
No, sir. It's really a brainstorming observation. Yeah.
Thank you, Sunilji. Thank you. So probably we are all aware of the hard work that has to be put in while coming up with a written treatise or written document. Fine. And again, given the nature of writing, because whatever is written, well, now in the digital era, we have the luxury of editing it quite frequently. But there was a time when we used to say that whatever is written is forever. Wrong or right, you cannot really make changes once you have published something. Fine. Now with this digital technology, we have the luxury and we can edit things number of times. But still we believe that a document which is prepared, does not have much scope of improvement or frequent improvement, to say that. While when we are putting in something in spoken form, we can modify ourselves. Well, whatever we speak is ephemeral. The moment it comes out of our mouth, it is lost unless and until it is being recorded. So, it has certain limitations. But do you think that writing happens automatically and it does not have any connection with your communicative ability? That is one. Your personality, that is number two. Well, interestingly, friends, while your communicative ability plays a very important role in the entire process, whether you are speaking or writing, one interesting thing is the way you write, the way you pace up your document that also reveals your personality. So selection of words, sentence structure, the emphasis, they all determine. And if we are aware of the writing technique of somebody, we can get to the personality traits of that person as well. Now, if writing process is so important, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this process. So I'll be sharing my presentation and would be talking about writing process. And in case you have any observations or any concerns, you can keep it to yourself, and later on we can always, discuss that. Fine. So can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, fine, friends. We are going to talk about writing process. Fine. But let me tell you why this is important, why we are trying to build our writing process. What is the gain? Well, professional communications are always very, very important. Why? Because they are outcome based. Even if we pass smiles, we have some purpose. Professional smiles are not for free. So if, the director of an institute smiles on some of his colleagues, that smile may not be treated as simple, innocent smile. People would certainly try to read between the lines, and they will try to find out the reasons behind that. Successful communication, successful professional communication is determined by positive outcomes. But let us know that clear communication, whether it is in spoken form, in written form, or non-verbal form, it depends on clear purposes, thorough awareness of the audience, careful attention to the message, and a well-defined sense of consequences. So, because of that, to begin with, let me talk about 4 basics that constitute our communication process, and this includes all sorts of communications. First of all, objective of communication. Well, friends, at the end of this session, what would be your takeaway? All that I talk here will not be your takeaway. Your takeaway, on the other hand, will be determined by your objective. So with what objective have you joined this program? Like somebody may have an objective to learn how to write research papers. Somebody might like to know about the process of writing. Somebody may have an objective to learn the research language or the nitty-gritties of research language. Now, if I talk about all these 3 kinds of people with 3 different objectives, I can safely say that their takeaways will be determined by their objectives. So somebody who is more interested in understanding the nuances of research language would find all those sessions on language more interesting and will understand it more and take it away. Somebody who is more interested in the process of writing would find this particular session very, very interesting and will have a more takeaway compared to somebody who has some other objective. So friends, unless and until you have a clear-cut objective, your communication will go haywire and you will not be able to achieve anything. It's about chalking out a path for yourself. If you are setting your feet out of your home and you have already chalked out a path for yourself and you know you are going to the market and you are going to a particular shop for buying a particular thing, obviously you know your objective and that will determine your path, selection of the path, and that will save your time and that will also have a positive. On the other hand, if you set your feet out of your home without having any particular objective, what will be your outcome? Nothing. You might go south, you might go north, you might go to the market, you might go to the ground, because you might like to try this or you might like to try that. But since you have not determined anything, obviously you will not gain anything. So friends, first of all, whether you are communicating through words, through your body language, in the spoken form or in the written form, the most important thing is you must have your objectives clear. So when I'm writing, I must have my objectives clear, whether I'm writing to lure the audience, whether I'm writing to motivate them, inspire them, or explain them, or whatever. Because the moment I know my objective, obviously all my efforts will be channelized to achieve that objective. And we always say that if you want your objectives to be physicalized, better to express your objectives in terms of verbs. So whenever you are writing something, you must ask yourself which verb defines your objective: to explain, to demonstrate, to discuss, to explore, to assess, to analyze. I mean, you can look at that. So I would suggest you to keep this in mind as your first basic of communication. So identify your objective. The next thing which is very important is whatever communication we are making has a purpose, has a target audience. So when you are writing for readership. When you are presenting, you have some audience in mind. So unless and until you analyze your audience or your readers, you may be filling their minds with ideas that may not be welcome, or that may be a waste of your effort and waste of time of your audience. So Professor Dwivedi knows I troubled him with my questions regarding the composition of audience. And the other day I asked him some basic questions regarding how many people will be there, what is their background, what would be their expectations from me. And that certainly helped me in preparing these slides and selecting my material. Fine. So friends, the next thing after identifying your objective is your analyzing your audience or your readers, because everything depends on that. If I have a mixed audience, obviously I will restrain myself from using too many examples from literature alone. And I may be, giving examples from the general areas of knowledge so that everybody can connect. Likewise, while using language and terms and terminology also, I would like to use a language which is palatable to each one of you. Fine. My way of explaining should also include the disciplines other than language and literature. Why? Because I know I have friends from different disciplines and they may have different concerns. So, friends, our selection of language, our tone, our organization of material, our technique of writing, they are all determined by our audience analysis. So, the second basic consideration in any communication is analyzing our audience or reader. The third thing, while analyzing our audience, these are the questions that we ask. What do I want my audience to understand, to feel, to believe, and what do I want them to do? Fine. So, again, some other questions are also equally important, like what is your knowledge of the topic and what is your knowledge of the technical terminology associated with the topic I'm talking about? What may be your points of resistance or negative perceptions or questions that I have to address? And if it's a large audience who is my primary audience, the persons who are most critical to my goals. So this will certainly help me in channelizing my effort and energy in bringing a communication process which is directly relevant to you. The third thing is technique. Now, this technique means your ability to put your knowledge in the form of spoken or written communication. Now, there are many people, you may have realized that they know much more, but when it comes to express, sometimes we find that some people, despite knowing their subject, are very poor speakers. They're not able to express themselves in a very emphatic manner. They may be wonderful writers. Interestingly, we'll find that most of the novelists, if you call them to talk about their writing on the stage, you will find and realize that they are poor speakers because they are not able to really talk about the creative process, which is wonderful when it comes to writing. But while expressing, they find themselves deficient of words and expressions. So, technique means you know your objective, you know your audience, but do you have the technique? Can you express yourself in an effective way so that you can achieve your objective? Now, this is again like playing a game. Let's say if we have to talk about cricket, I have to score and I know that the third man is weak. Okay. And I want to channelize the ball to the third man area so that I can maximize it rather than playing in the covers where the best of the fielders field. But then comes the question, do I have the technique to maneuver the ball wherever I like? Fine. So if I know, then only I can find gaps. If I'm deficient on technique, obviously, despite being a good batsman, I may not be able to score runs. So that is true of our communication as well. So this is the third basic. The fourth basic is summary and call to action. What do we do? In any communication situation, we have our objective, we have analyzed our audience, and then we have devised a technique. And then communication will not be complete unless and until at the end of communication we summarize the whole thing in nutshell and give a clear call to action to our audience. So I may be talking for 2 hours about writing process, but unless and until I summarize the whole thing at the end and give you a clear call to action, that is, now that you have attended this session, what is expected of you? So we always try to pace up our communication in such a manner that the whole message is given in three different phases in three different ways. So first of all, we introduce the topic, that is, you tell our audience or our readers what we are going to talk about. Then we talk about that. That is the main body of our talk. And then at the end of it, we summarize and say what we have been telling them. So we tell them what we are going to tell them, then we tell them, and then we tell them what we have told them. So the same information is being given three times, and people are less likely to miss it out, because we all know there are limitations of memory retention. So, our minds may be wavering, and that's why we might miss out on something if it is given just for a short while. So, friends, with these four basics in mind, let us talk about our writing process. Process, as we all know, denotes a series of actions that are performed to achieve a desired effect. So there are doing everything. So there is a process of cooking, there is a process of baking a cake, there is a process of writing a research paper as well. So that's why we have to talk about process. By process, we mean the different steps which are to be followed in order to come up with an effective piece of writing. And mostly we find in the process of academic and research writing that these steps are recursive, in the sense there is enough going back and forth. So there is nothing like a linear development of thought. In the process of writing, we always go back and forth. Fine? So when we are writing something and at the same time we are correcting spelling errors, now we are following a process which will follow the process of writing, because it is only after preparing a document that we bother about revision. Fine? But sometimes we do that simultaneously as well. So in the process, we are going recursive. Sometimes we also go back to our sentences, read them out for clarity, and make changes right away. While this is a process which comes after the first draft of writing is over. Now you look at this beautiful, cartoon message, and you will realize how difficult it is for teachers to make their students realize what mistakes have they made. I read your draft of the paper for the conference. Great work. I just made a few minor alterations. You rewrote the whole paper, sir. Yes. Well, I didn't want to embarrass you. Well, so you can realize, our plight as research guides, and you may also be guiding some scholars. And whenever they bring their papers to us or thesis chapters to us for correction, well, when we look at the work we carry out and the markings that we do, at the end of it, there are modifications in tone of 30 to 40% at times. At times, there are many, there are more than that as well. So the final product that comes out certainly has lot of share of the supervisor. Fine. So, and even if you believe that you are a wonderful writer and your writing skills are really very good, when you send your papers for publication to top quality journals, you are always surprised by the comments that you receive and the number of times you are asked to revise your draft. All your complacency is gone. Why? Because there cannot be a perfect document or a perfect way of writing. So there can be different perspectives. And when different people look at the same document, they might find different faults with the same document. Even, let me tell you, even you will find so many corrections in your own document once you have finished, dissociated yourself, and after recollecting yourself, you are again coming back to your document and looking at that with an indifferent eye, the eyes of an objective reader. You will also find, because what happens, I have many a time experimented and found out, even if we write wrongly, we read it rightly since we have written it. So we might not find that mistake. But when we dissociate ourselves and again come back to that particular document and again start reading it with fresh mind, then we are able to point out those mistakes. But let me tell you, friends, you may have 10 readings of your document, but I can still say that your document will not be completely error-free. And if somebody, a third party is, going through your document, he or she may be able to find some mistakes in your document. So please remember that. So generally there are 3 phases of any writing process: pre-writing phase, writing phase, and post-writing or rewriting phase. Now, these phases might give us ideas regarding how to begin. What are the thought processes that go into that moment of enlightenment when we start writing? Because as Sunil said, writing does not happen just by writing. A lot of efforts are made before we put our pen on paper or our fingers on our keyboards. So, what are those processes that make us eligible for writing something or that help us in beginning the writing process? All these processes fall in what we call pre-writing phase, and then we start writing. Now, once we have written the first draft, that writing phase is over. But then that writer is not final. It requires some work. So friends, those who know about film production, they may be knowing that, lot of work is done before launching a movie. So dialogues have to be finalized, the script writing has to be done, location has to be finalized, costumes have to be designed, and lot of work is to be done before that. And then the shooting starts. But do you know, even after shooting is over, it takes months and sometimes years in post-production work. And that post-production work is editing. Fine? Editing and making it sharp. And then only the movie can be released. So none of these phases is easy or useless. All these phases follow a logical pattern and logical design, and we must be aware. We know that this writing process is cyclical. We have used the word recursive. So we'll find that, we go back to our drafts time and again. So it is in a cycle actually. So you can look at this. And we are starting here at the pre-writing stage. So what we are doing, we are generating ideas, understanding the ideas of others. We are collecting all relevant information. We are taking notes. And then we are practicing what is called brainstorming, looping, and free writing. Then we are planning how to put our ideas into action. So we start organizing our ideas. We do mind mapping, clustering of different ideas, coming out with outlines. Okay. And then after we start the drafting process. So, much energy and effort has gone before we have actually started writing. So writing means drafting. We start writing the initial drafts, and we mainly focus on the development of ideas at this stage, because organization of ideas will also be very loose at this particular juncture. And later on, we have to tie all those loose ends to come up with a compact draft or compact writer. So once we have captured all the ideas that we have to make use of in our write-up, then only we reflect on what we have written, and then only we look at that afresh and indulge in what is called editing, proofreading, and revisioning. Fine. So when we are writing the first draft, the most important concern is how to capture all the ideas, because we may be full of ideas, and if we try to stop every 5 minutes or 5 seconds to clean up our mind with, or separate out the acceptable ideas from unacceptable ones, in the process we may be losing out the vital ideas, because we all know once the mind is at work, the hands cannot really compete with our mind. Mind is lightning fast. So the ideas are just crossing our minds at such a frantic pace that even if we try to match up with them and record each one of them, we may not be able to do that. So in the process, maybe 60-70% of the ideas will be automatically lost, even if we work with a kind of hustlerish energy. But at least we will be able to, capture the rest 30% of ideas, and they will help us in our writing process. So pre-writing, before we start writing, we have to be clear about the ideas about which we want to write. So as I told you initially, you must be aware of your objective. So what is your objective? If I am writing a research paper, what is my objective? There can be an overarching objective and there can be some sub-objectives. Now, overarching objective is getting it published. But how will it be published? It will be published only if I make it publishable. So there are other objectives. Now, the most important objective is my ideas should be acceptable and convincing. So supposing you have made a breakthrough in medical science. Now, the first of the challenges is how to document that breakthrough so that you can send it to a top quality medical journal for publishing. So, first of all, you need to know why do you want to share your ideas. You want to share your ideas because you want the medical science people to know about this breakthrough. Now comes the question, will it be convincing enough? How should I put my ideas? What details will go into the making of my ideas concrete, feasible, and convincing? So methodology will also come into play. The data, the images, the processes in place, all these things will form part of your writing process. So you must be clear about the idea that you have to convey and the objective that you have in mind. So you have the idea of communicating that medical breakthrough that you have achieved, and the objective is letting people know about it, feeling convinced about it, and making use of it in future treatment. Fine? So, what happens in academic writing? Mostly we are dependent on the sources, the secondary sources or primary sources that are available to us. We go through them, we collect ideas, and we collate those ideas, and then we come up with our own idea. What happens in academic research? Unless and until your ideas are amply substantiated or backed up by scholarly literature, people will not feel convinced. So, in medical science, if you achieve some breakthrough, you have to bring some previous studies to prove your point, that you have taken help from this particular treatment, line of treatment. You have taken your ideas from this particular experiment or this particular, case study or this particular, journal publication or book or whatever. I mean, unless and until you are able to convince your audience or your readers with ample substance or evidence, they will not take your ideas. So that's why before you write something as part of your academic research, you have to research a lot. You have to read a lot. You have to go through a thorough process of literature review in order to be able to pinpoint the research gap and then come up with research questions, research objectives, and also a methodology which is suitable for this kind of study. Now, getting started, the most important thing is getting the reader's point of view and the main idea. Because we are not writing for ourselves, we are writing for a readership, we are writing for an audience. Fine. So, where to begin? So, how do you plan your writing? You start with pen and paper at your computer, and what do? You get your thoughts on the paper and don't leave them in your head. First of all, the concrete listing of your idea, although the idea is not final, a rough idea has to be there somewhere. So before you start writing, you start making a strategy for writing. You start taking care of the different stakeholders. Fine. So Well, what is your objective? If you have to write your objective, can you write one sentence objective that I want to achieve this through this writing? And then the second thing, who will read it? Okay, can you identify and pinpoint the people who will read this document? Now, what may be in the mind of my readers? What may be their expectations from me? Let's say I'm sending my paper to a journal. Well, I need to know what kind of papers are accepted in that journal. And I need to know the frequency of the journal so that I can assure myself of the chances of getting published 50%, 40%, 60%, 75%. More the frequency, more chances of getting accepted. Fine. Rather than if it is an annual journal and there is one issue containing just 5 to 7 articles and 700 people are sending, then my chances of getting published are 1 by 700. But if the same journal has 6 issues, those 700 papers divided by 6 certainly make our chances better. So, first of all, can I pinpoint or jot down what is the idea that I'm trying to convey? Then can I identify who is going to read it and what may be their expectations from me? What points of resistance may be there? What negative thoughts or perceptions they may have? Fine. So the moment you talk about a particular breakthrough in medical science, lot of eyebrows will be raised and people might like to know, no, this does not look convincing to me. How can you achieve this? How can you predict this? Where are the studies to substantiate this? So these are all the markers that will help you in preparation of your document. If you can anticipate all these questions and can amply satisfy your readers, obviously your write-up is up to mark, otherwise it will not be accepted. Fine. Because first ask what is the main idea. If I had only one sentence to summarize this idea, can I do that? If you exactly know your objective, you can do that. Then how does this affect me? Why should I bother? How will this information make my work easier or harder? What have I to do? If you pay attention to all these questions initially, that will make your pre-writing phase very, very meaningful. So what do we do at the pre-writing stage? One of the problems is this, Yeah. So at the pre-writing stage, what are you doing? You are doing everything that will help you in writing your draft of the document. So ask yourself, what is the purpose of writing? Brainstorm. Pretend that you are being interviewed by someone about the topic. That way you can anticipate the response of your readers and their concerns as well. So you divide yourself in two parts. One part is asking questions, another part is making clarifications or defending his or her ideas. So that way you can always make your document readable and to the liking of your readers. Summarize your whole idea in 3 to 4 sentences, and these sentences are going to be your terms of reference. They are going to help you in the entire document preparation. This phase involves planning your written piece that helps you achieve the following. It gives you your paper shape. It does not help your ideas dry up halfway. Rather, you can have something and you can always refer back to that. You will not forget interesting ideas that came to your mind because you have probably jotted down everything and you can make use of that at a later stage. You are less likely to repeat yourself because everything is organized, and so you have already taken care of the different steps and stages. Your paper will be ordered logically, and pre-writing phase involves planning, time management, and developing a working title of your topic. You always ensure that the title of your topic is succinctly formulated, because it has to capture the main focus and it should not be ambiguous, and it should also be able to grab the attention of your readers. So that's why we always believe that the research topics or the topics of our papers initially are tentative. They are not final. Because during the course of writing, we might realize that, the focus is on something and my title says something else. I remember in my case, two or three of my scholars had to change their research title at the time of submission. Why? Because during the course of research, they realized that their focus is not amply clarified by their title. So the titles have to be selected very, very carefully. So what happens? We research the topic, we frame certain research questions. Now, what are these research questions? These research questions are the ideas that we have about something, the ideas that we are going to explore further or establish. So let's say if you are doing a research in literature, this kind of question might come to your mind. How has subaltern literature brought to visibility the stories of unimagined communities or invisible communities? Now, subaltern literature talks about, the people on the margins in the society, and these people have been written off for centuries, and only recently they have been excavated, their literature, their lives, their trials, their trails, they have been brought to focus. So if you are, researching on Dalit literature or subaltern literature, this kind of question might come to your mind. And this is an example of research question. You can also have some hypothesis which you would like to test. It is a theory that you would like to establish. So is it true that the subaltern people have no visibility? If we turn it this way, it will become a hypothesis. Is it true that subaltern people do not have an identity of their own? Now, through your research, you will try to find an answer to this. You can always establish or negate a hypothesis. Are effects of the AIDS epidemic on our society similar to the effects of Black Death on medieval Europe? This is the hypothesis that you would like to test, and you would like to prove whether it is wrong or right. There are some good research questions and there are bad research questions. On the left, you have all the good reasons. On the right, you have all the bad reasons. So We look for research questions because we have genuine interest in that area of research, not because they are easy options. We are not considering a research area because it does not involve much theoretical stuff. Rather, we are looking at it because we have familiarity with that field. Okay? We have experience of research methods, and based on that, we are employing a research method. And it's not that we saw something on TV and that's why we are going for a method. We are taking up a research topic. Why? Because our tutor has recommended that area, and not because we are determined to go against our supervisor's wish. See, if you have this kind of defiant attitude in the beginning itself, I'm afraid to say you will never get your degree. So you and your supervisor have to be on the same platform. Okay? You are choosing a topic because you have prior reading of the topic, and it's not because you are blank on ideas, and that's why you are going for a particular topic. You are not choosing a research topic because your friend is doing the same thing and he might be of help when it comes to material collection and making calculations or discussions or whatever. Rather, your selection of your research topic should be based on the criteria of access to research subject. So these are the good and bad reasons for choosing research questions or research topics. How do we develop a working title? Why we are calling it a working title? Because we know the final title might be different. Because once we have finished this study, we might like to revisit our initial title and rephrase it for more clarity, more focus, and more meaningfulness. So we identify our audience and purpose, we brainstorm, and we do random listing. Randomly list concepts of no particular order and in no particular significance. Give free play to your imagination, reread the list and circle items that seem most significant to you. So what happens, the working title is one in which you are trying to find an answer to your research question. So what do I exactly want to prove in my research or explore in my research or analyze in my research or focus in my research? So you can come up with 3, 4, 5 working titles, and later on you can always look at them and settle for one. What areas are you expert in? List some events or controversies that concern you. What news stories have roused your interest in that particular research area? What have been your favorite courses in the college? These are some of the considerations for selection of your research area. What topics in these courses did you find interesting? Now you can, let's say, if somebody is researching in the field of language and literature, or let's say literature. I feel confident talking about literature because I'm having a background in that. So that gives me that extra edge. So what happens when a student comes? We ask his interest area, and broadly we are at that point in time we are interested in knowing which genre of literature. So the student says poetry or novel or drama or critical theory. So once the student says that I'm interested in doing research in the area of novel, Then we start asking, what kind of novels have you read? Which of the authors are your favorite? And then we ask them, what perspective would you like to take? And accordingly, at the end of this discussion, after several rounds, we come to a conclusion that the scholar concerned wants to make a psychoanalytic study of the characters of D.H. Lawrence. Okay, or somebody else. So, your research topic or the working title is, first of all, determined by making an assessment of all these things, your expert areas, your interest areas, your favorite courses. And then again, it's not about having interest in something. Good research does not come out of our interest alone, because research is a specific field and it is a very serious activity. And anything and everything that we write cannot be called a research output. Because for research to happen, we need to have ample evidence, ample support material, ample theoretical background, ample experimental research to prove our ideas. So we cannot solely look for a topic based on our interest. But if you are interested in something and we have support literature available, that makes our job easier, because interest, becomes a driving force or motivational force in our research. So we can write as many phrases as we can for all those tentative areas which we would like to further research and narrow down in order to come up to our research writing. And this is true of both, PhD research and writing research papers. Fine. So you can watch for hotspots or centers of gravity that emerge out of your reading, and then you can settle for one of them. Now, brainstorming, what do we mean by brainstorming? Now, brainstorming is a wonderful way of, setting your mind on fire. Is it about putting a storm in our brain or putting our brain in storm? What is this brainstorming? Yes, what do you mean by brainstorming? Have any of you brainstormed at any point in time?
We regularly do, sir.
Okay. So what do? Do you put brain in?
No, give out the ideas without evaluating first.
Okay.
And then we later in the second round, we take up each idea, evaluate the pros and cons, and then arrive at a consensus.
Okay. I find this phrase very, very, interesting and intriguing. Brainstorming. So that's about, putting our brain in some kind of storm. So there is some kind of storm inside the brain, and this is the storm of ideas. So what happens, in brainstorming, we set our mind to work without controlling it. Fine?
Excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, please.
Basically, sir, we whatever comes to our mind and we start thinking on that with, I think, lots of reasoning and questioning and logic thinking. So this is somehow I feel that it is an actual kind of brainstorming. We don't accept as it is the thing. We have all kind of reasoning and logic behind it.
Okay. So I would like to contradict your thinking. If we have logic in thinking, then it is not brainstorming. Okay? The process of brainstorming is all about setting your mind in motion without putting any restraints. Fine? So you just leave your mind. You start thinking about a topic, your maiden thoughts, and try to capture all those ideas that are coming to your mind as a maiden thought. At that point in time, all you need, you have to be fast and furious, and you have to jot down as many ideas and thoughts and words. And in the process, you may not have time enough to judge and reason. That's the point I'm making. The moment you say we have enough reasoning, we have enough judgment, you are not brainstorming, you are organizing. And that is a later stage. So you allow your mind at work, let it be fast and furious, and in tandem with your mind, let your pain flow. Let your pain record all those ideas, as many as you can. At this point in time, you are not bothered about whether the ideas are valid or they are ridiculous. Fine? And that is why we always suggest that at this point in time, you can not write whole sentences. You should not bother about spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes. All you have to do is mark your ideas in such a way that you can decipher it later on. So it can be a phrase, it can be one word, it can be a whole sentence written wrongly, it can be anything. Fine. So all you need to capture your maiden thought on that particular topic for that particular time. So the topic is, what should be my research topic? That can also be your topic. What should be my research topic? And then your mind starts thinking, it can be a study of this. No, it can be a study of that. And so on and so forth. And you are accepting each and every idea at that point in time. Let's say you are trying to, plan some picnic activity. And then one of your friends says, what about treasure hunting? Treasure hunt. And then another friend says that it's a stupid idea. Now what will happen? The person who came up with the idea of treasure hunting will keep quiet and will not give any ideas in future. And that way you will lose one vital member of your group. The same thing will happen if you interrupt your mind at the time of brainstorming. The mind will stop giving you ideas. Fine. So that is why I'm saying that, brainstorming means letting perfection go in favor of creativity. Fine. So you might realize how many times you have written down an idea, then you have immediately crossed it off saying that it's not perfect. And how many times you may have realized that you are not able to write anything because you are waiting for that moment of enlightenment when a perfect idea will cross your mind. This way you will not be able to write anything. So brainstorming teaches us to stop criticizing ourselves and let our creativity in motion, and then later on we can take care of things. So, when you go for research, how do you collect material? Do you first up decide that you will go through the material, test its veracity or relevance, and then only you will collect the material? No, it does not happen. When we are mining and bringing out some precious metal, at that point in time, that metal is full of ores, full of impurities. And it is at a later stage that we separate it out. we refine it, and then it comes to its final shape. Fine. So brainstorming is mining your ideas. Fine. It means letting perfection go for the sake of high out creativity. It is sometimes mistrusted or neglected, especially by technical people whose training tells them to do everything right the first time. But in the writing process, if you ask me, I will always dissuade you from having this perfectionist attitude, because this is the biggest enemy of any creativity. The creative people tend to make experiments. They are not afraid to make mistakes. So if you want to be a good writer, you should also tend to make mistakes. Okay? And should be able to revise your document as many times as required. So what are the brainstorming guidelines? Loosen up. So set your mind in motion. You can start anywhere. Not necessarily you are talking about the research topic, and then you are talking about research methodology, then you are talking about research outcome. No. You can straight away talk about methodology, you can straight away talk about takeaway, and then you can talk about the topic and other things. So it can be in any fashion. You can work energetically, write as quickly as you can, so that every idea that comes to your mind at that point in time is accepted. Accept every idea, write everything down, ignore spelling, punctuation, and organization. So, this is also free writing, an example of free writing, or later on I'll talk about, another term that is used for this, which is called aerobic writing. So free writing is what? It aims to generate ideas. It is also referred to as automatic writing with no logic. We are writing for 8 to 10 minutes in sentences without stopping. Whatever is coming to our mind, we are writing that without bothering about the nitty-gritties of writing. It is private writing at this stage. We don't have any external reader. So we are talking to ourselves and we are not bothered about who will think what. It is not structured, and we are not bothered about grammar, punctuation, and spelling at this stage. It is just blurting out whatever is there in our mind. Fine. Now what happens? It strengthens our personal connection to the thesis, or it puts our personal voice in our impersonal research. So we are assessing ourselves. Now, this free writing is very much like aerobic writing. This is another term which is used. Many of you may be knowing about aerobic exercises. What do we do in aerobic exercises? Do we clean up every 5 minutes if we are sweating it out? Or do we work out throughout and stop only after completing it? And then only we bother about cleaning ourselves. What is the case in aerobic writing, aerobic exercises? Tell me. Do we stop every 5 steps, or after every exercise, do we stop and clean ourselves? Yeah, are there any people?
No, no,
Yeah.
sir, not every after 5 minutes.
Yeah, Dr. Joy. So this kind of writing is also akin to aerobic exercises, where we are writing, means input. Fine, only input. We are not at all bothered about what we are putting in at this stage. Fine. So input, 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 edit later. So practice aerobic writing. Don't think your first write-up is going to be the final draft of your writing. Because the writing process is not like that. There is nothing like perfect writing in one go. So let us have three writing task one. What is this task? You consider what can I write in 5 minutes? What can you write? Write continuously, non-stop in sentences on this question. Then ask yourself a question, why I have nothing to write about? Count the number of words that you wrote. Fine. What is the objective of this task? This task is an activity that will prompt your writing. And if it, even at an early stage, when you do it, you may not have a clear idea of where your project is going. You can even think of writing on the way to being good writing. Now, what will happen? You may be completely blank. What should I write in 5 minutes? About what? But once you start writing, you will certainly come up with something. That means there may be some people who may be thinking for 5 minutes and may not be able to write a single sentence. There may be people who will write whatever comes to their mind and will be at work for all those 5 minutes. Well, what is proved by this task? Writing comes by writing and not by thinking about writing. So this is about free writing. If you want to write something, you start writing. Just by thinking about writing will not make writing happening. Fine. There can be 10 questions to test your knowledge. What are the definite and indefinite articles? These are very commonplace questions. And you can, if you have this in mind, you can just write about them. When and how do you use the semicolon? What is a personal pronoun? What is an antecedent? What is subject-verb agreement? What are the essential elements of a sentence? Give examples of sentences using active and passive. What is the difference between the two? Define sentence boundaries and why they are important. Now, if you pay attention to all these 10 questions, they will certainly help you in your writing process because they are very frequently used and they concern you. So like, we always struggle with using articles. We always struggle with identifying the personal pronouns or antecedents or finding the right kind of subject verb concur. Or forget about that, we don't know what are the essential elements that make a sentence. We also have a doubt regarding using active or passive voice, whether passive has to be used all the time or active has to be used. What is the difference in what condition I have to use a passive construction, in what I have to use an active one, and how sentence boundaries are important. What is a topic sentence? Now, these considerations are prior to your writing. Then you are looking for information. Once you have satisfied yourself with all the relevant questions pertaining to your language structuring needs, the second thing is information that you will express through language. So you obtain relevant text or information using two techniques. One is called skimming, learning about a text before reading it. Fine. And the second is scanning, means reading through the text for specific information. So you must start with some kind of background reading, and then you should come to your own subject area of investigation. After that, you can start outlining, developing an idea that I'll be writing on this particular. You can cluster your ideas in different clusters. Fine. The ideas that you have concentrated, or the ideas that you have gathered from your brainstorming. So in brainstorming, what you have done, probably you have more ideas than required. Now in the second go, you look at your ideas, cluster them in different sections. Like 5 ideas might belong to one particular family, 5 others will form part of another segment of your writing. Five of them will be irrelevant altogether. So what happens, you prepare an outline of your presentation. Now what you do while brainstorming, you gathered all the ideas. When you look at those ideas, you will find that many of them are useless, many of them are more relevant, many of them are less relevant, and then they are not in any kind of structured fashion. So you will start organizing them, that I'll use this idea first, this second, this third, and will prepare a structured outline of your document, thesis, or your write-up. Once you have prepared the outline, let's see, abstract, keywords and phrases, introduction, keywords and phrases, main ideas for the paragraphs, materials and methods. This is how you plan your entire write-up. And then once you have planned it that way, then you start filling up these sections. So you have written abstract. Now you start writing abstract. An abstract is 200 to 300 words, about your research, which is a kind of window display of your research. What your research is all about, what problem has been investigated, what methodology has been adopted for the purpose. And then that leads to introduction, in which you give the complete background of your study, historical, biographical, experimental, and so on and so forth. And you also talk about all those, segments that will make your thesis or your paper. So you talk about the organization of material in your paper, talk about your methodology, you talk about chapterization if it happens to be a thesis, and so on and so forth. Once you have provided a detailed introduction, then you move to your discussion part, that is the main part of your paper or your thesis. Fine. So there again, what are the main ideas that you would like to elaborate? If you have jotted down the ideas first, then you can always elaborate them, and that will result in the complete document. So pre-writing phase, you are planning the framework, developing a storyline for the readers. You are outlining the building blocks that will help you, your methods employed, solutions, conclusions, outcomes, etc., on which your write-up is built. Developing the content of a chapter, like purpose of each chapter, linking up the different chapters, okay, the limitations, the works that have been carried out, and outcomes of those works, and what is next, what is new that you are going to give. So the contents of your chapter surround around all these considerations. Then you start sequencing your chapters and linking content of your different chapters. And these are the goals. Fine. The goals are specific, okay, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time scaled. Okay. And the language is simple, meaningful, something which is, happening right now, and it is directed towards what you want to that effect. Then it takes us to the writing phase, which is the most important one. The pre-writing or planning phase is followed by writing phase, which is also referred to as the drafting phase. So probably you have all the material. You have the plan ready. Once your plan is ready, then you have to execute that plan. So you start writing, and the first attempt at drawing your thoughts together is called drafting. So here you focus on what you want to say, and you can consider the finer details of how it should be said later on. At this step, it is a writerly or scriptable writing rather than readerly or legible writing. Writerly writing means what you want to write without bothering about whether your write-up is readerly or not. That means the first draft is never readable, never complete, never perfect. Fine. So at this stage, you start with a working thesis, and then you write your ideas in sentences and paragraphs. You follow your pre-writing plan and outline that you prepared. A research paper generally has introduction, body, and conclusion. This is how it is developed. So in introduction of an academic paper, usually 1 to 2 paragraphs are added by way of background information. And in general, your introduction contains things like short anecdotes or surprising statements or quotations from famous people, or brief and interesting historical review of your topic, or statement which stresses the importance of your topic, or some kind of contradictions of opinions you can begin with to build the value of your own opinion. And it is followed by the body paragraph. Body paragraphs can be written in many ways depending on your purpose. However, each paragraph should have one point which supports the thesis statement. Most body paragraphs have what? Topic sentence, explanation of the topic sentence, supporting material, and then concluding or bridging of sentence with the next paragraph. Now, conclusion may be the shortest paragraph, but it is important because, the readers will remain glued to your topic only because of your conclusion, because that will give them enough idea of what is being written, and generally connect the last sentence of your previous paragraph to the next one. So your conclusion will refer to the next step. And, it summarizes the findings of your paper by restating the thesis, in other words, phrases. So entire writing process comprises, introduction, then the main explanation or main discussion, followed by summary or conclusion. So writing process, what happens, we show the significance of your finding in your conclusion. It ends with a strong, memorable concluding statement. And we end with the significance of our paper. and relate our conclusion to our introduction, and it is an effective way of wrapping up our paper. We always end with an idea for the reader to think about, a prediction, a recommendation, or a clear-cut takeaway. So when you write something and conclude, at the time of conclusion, you look back at your original objective, you look back at your uh, the concerns of your readers or audience that you visualize initially, and you ask yourself a simple question whether you have been able to accomplish them. So conclusion is part of that classic formula I was talking about, that you tell them what you are going to tell them, then you tell them, then you tell them what you have told them. So introduction is what you are going to tell them. Then your main part is the description part. So you are telling them what you wanted to tell them. And conclusion is again repeating what you have told them. So it summarizes the whole finding of your research. So this is just from Oedipus the King to make it more relevant and emphatic. Now the most important phase is post-writing phase. While pre-writing phase was very, very important because that gave us all the tools that were required for writing a document, and probably at that stage we equipped ourselves with the required methodology, the required information, the required ideas, the required material, the required experiments, fine, required preparations for the experiments to be carried out, and all those chemicals that were required to carry out our experiment we gathered at that point in time. During the writing phase, we used those chemicals in measures that were required to conduct our research. Now, recording of that
Nothing to
is as important. So post-writing phase is the phase when we look at our first draft, we revise it, we polish it, and make it readerly from writerly. So at that point in time, it is a writerly document. We want to make it a readerly document. Now we take care of not our own ease and comfort, not our own way of looking at the flow of ideas, but processing the entire information from the point of view of our readers. So we look at the whole document and ask a question whether our title is appropriate. If not, we need to rephrase our title for better clarity and better focus. Do the different sections of the paper have the right weight? Is my introduction enough to introduce my topic? Have I included everything that I needed to introduce my topic, my methodology, my material, the method of collection, material collection, the method of calculations, and everything? Have I talked about all these things? Do I amply explain and put a stress on the different topics in my main part of the document? Have they been properly explained and developed? And third thing, have they been logically arranged? Fine. Does the argument or discussion develop clearly and logically? Well, have I forgotten any important points that I should support the development? If the answer is yes, I need to look for that information and I need to inculcate that or incorporate that in my write-up. So read your content again to make sure that your goal is achieved. Make sure that your citation is proper, both in text and out text or end text citation. Okay. Follow any design that is prescribed by your institute or the intended journal or your discipline. Like in literature research, we follow MLA, Modern Languages Association recommendations about citations. There is APA, okay, American Psychological Association. There is Chicago Journal. There is IEEE recommendation. So there can be any kind of citation style, but you have to be consistent with that, whatever you write. You rewrite the sentences that are lacking in clarity. You edit the sentences that have more than required information. Delete unnecessary details. Relook at the transitions, vocabulary, sentence, and paragraph structure. Proofread for punctuations, grammars, spellings, etc. Finally, you can take help of someone competitive enough for proofreading. Dear friends, if you recall, I told you, if we look at our own write-up, maybe we might unconsciously correct the wrongs that we have made while reading through. So it is always recommended that you can have a second person or third person view on your write-up. So you can always request one of your colleagues, one of your friends to go through your write-up and proofread it carefully and point out if any mistakes are there. So revising is one step at which we are looking at the overall picture, overall organization and logical flow of our document. We are looking at the effectiveness of thesis statement. We are looking at the introduction, whether it is complete in itself. It provides all the relevant information. We are looking at the main body. We are looking at the concluding paragraph. We are looking at the entire document to look for clarity of topic sentences, appropriateness of tone and style and language, taking in view the intended audience and purpose of that particular document. Then we edit it and proofread it. And then we send it for publishing. Friends, I'm nearing the end of my presentation and we are barely left with 13 minutes or so. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the most important aspect of your writing process, and that is called revising. Now, the revisions are too complex to carry out in one go. So you need several relook at your paper or your document. So what we call revising is divided into three phases: big, middle, and little revising. We cannot revise our document all at once. So we need to read through our document at least 3 times. I recommend to read it 3 times, which is called big revising, middle revising, and little revising. Now, what do we mean by big revising? We read through the entire document several times and we look for only certain, factors each time. So we are reading through the document first of all to look at it for its, appeal in entirety. Whether I have been able to come up with a document which looks convincing enough. Okay, so we are looking for the overall or big picture. whether the contents are good, the organizations are good, the objectives have been achieved, the goals have been accomplished, and the reader's concerns have been addressed. So we are looking at our entire concern, the big picture of our paper. Then we go for the middle revising, which is polishing and refining the phrases and sentences. So we are looking at the individual sentences. We are looking at the repetition of phrases. Friends, what happens, when we talk about writing process, we always say you must have access to thesaurus. We must vary the length and breadth of your sentences. And you must try to avoid repetition of a particular phrase, a particular word, or a particular sentence in the same paragraph. This is not considered good. Fine? So you must have access to thesaurus where you can look for similar meaning words, so that each time you are referring to a particular idea, you have a different way of putting it, and you bring in different words and different phrases. So during the middle revising, you are looking at individual sentences, and you are looking at their readability, their clarity, and you are, cutting out whatever is redundant, whatever is not clear or ambiguous, and you are looking for words and phrases, their potential to create any kind of confusion, their potential to go against the intended meaning, and accordingly you are looking for the most appropriate words in place of such words. So you are looking for your clarity of sentences. If you find that a particular sentence is too long to digest at one go, you can cut it short, you can break it into 2 or 3 sentences, and so on and so forth. So you are looking for clarity and simplicity at this stage. Now the third or little revising is only when you are not looking at sentences, you are not looking at the overall picture. At this stage, you are just looking at the minor details of spellings and punctuations. So if you follow these 3 phases of revision, I'm sure, friends, your final document will come out near perfect, not perfect anyway, but it will certainly take care of much of our writing concerns. Then you look for visual clarity, whether the paragraphs have been clearly defined, you have used enough margins, and the other, details regarding formatting. Then you can polish your write-up, look for simplicity, avoid the specialist and trap trends. We are always tempted to use a specialist language, but sometimes the specialist languages may be difficult for people to understand. Researchers, however, allow us that luxury because they are specific areas and they require a specific language. So we are allowed to use jargons, but how nice if we can write our researches in languages that are understandable and simple, rather than writing in a language which is very, very difficult, a language only for specialists. So look for clarity, look for simplicity in your sentences, and this will help you come out with a document which is mostly free from error and which mostly addresses all the concerns, yours as well as the concerns of your readers, your publishers, and everybody. And these are the references that have been used in preparing this presentation. So friends, in this presentation, we talked about the writing process. If you recall, we started by making a reference to 4 basics of any communication, whether written communication or verbal or non-verbal communication. So we talked about having a clear-cut objective. We talked about analyzing our audience. We talked about developing an appropriate technique. We talked about summarizing our ideas and having a clear call to action. And then we started talking about the writing process. And we realized that writing is one of the most difficult arts and skills and needs a lot of meticulous attention to details and phases in order to come up with a document. So we divided it into 3 phases: pre-writing phase, writing phase, and post-writing phase. In pre-writing phase, we talked about the initial difficulties or hiccups in writing and all those leads that are required in order to make the writing happen. So collection of material, ideas, planning, preparation, and all those things form part of our pre-writing process. And then once we had all the base material or all the raw material, we started manufacturing our writing. That means we started writing in the real sense. But once we wrote, this writing was like that building a structure which has been prepared but has not been given finishing touches. So we entered the last phase, that is post-writing, that is editing or polishing our write-up. And if I take my earlier example forward, a building without finishing, without color, without painting and other decoration, internal decoration, will not look nice and presentable or will not be livable. So likewise, our writing will also not be complete and readable unless and until we indulge in post-writing phase and we look at our write-up for clarity of purpose, for clarity of message, for clarity of language, and so on and so forth. So this is all, friends. I'd love to have your questions quickly. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, sir. It was really an insightful lecture. You delivered a very good talk on writing as a process. Now the floor is open for the question. So I request all the participants who have ever any questions, they can ask. Unmute yourself and ask the question.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, please.
Sir, this is not a question, but a humble request to you, because in between my side, the power was gone. When we are talking about the writing as a process, and when power came back, you are on the visual literature representation. So if you can take back me on that slide or just between, I don't know, but in these 10 minutes I have lost because the flow.
Yeah,
other topics are very much clear. I'm very, very thankful to you, sir.
Sunilji, thank you.
So I think, sir will be sharing the whole PPT also.
Yeah,
I will request.
That's a point I'm going to make.
Yeah.
Professor Dwivedi has also recorded it. So maybe you will have access to recording as well.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Any other concerns that we would like to take up? Yeah, Professor Dwivedi,
if anybody has any question, can ask.
Yeah.
Already we are running short of time. It's 11.
Quickly, if there are any.
Yes, sir.
Sir, my question is about the research topic. You know, what happened with me also when doing the brainstorming. Once I approached to the research topic, but after digging out some matter, study material or dig deeper, then I found that I'm not feeling relatable, you know, and then mind shifting to another topic. Maybe this happened in the final decision process. So how to resolve this? You know, at the first stage, sometimes we lose the confidence.
Yeah. That's very much right. Let me tell you one thing. Mostly the minds of initial researchers are always wavering, and you have temptation to go to this topic or that topic. It's not that easy selection of a topic. So you have a wonderful wonderful tool with you called supervisor. So you can use that tool to fix it up. Fine. So it is your supervisor who takes your ideas, their ideas, and then helps you narrow down your focus and decide your topic.
Kindly put attendance link, sir.
Yes, Usha. Dr. Usha.
In chat box, I inquired, sir. Kindly put attendance link, sir.
Okay. What is that?
No, she is asking for attendance link, sir. It is already shared.
Okay.
Madam, please look for it. Just scroll up and down. You can find it.
So, Professor Dwivedi, I guess you may be having your other session. I don't want it to be delayed.
So thank you very much, sir, for this insightful lecture. Very engaging. And certainly the participants must have been benefited out of it. Already people are writing the feedback and they are really glad to hear you on this topic. Thank you very much, sir. Once again.
Dr. Prabhas.
Yes.
Sir, I'm thankful to you actually for inviting Dr. Nagendra, sir, because he has thorough knowledge on academic writing and completely a different view he has provided to all of us. Will you please share his email or mobile number? I already have yours. Please. If I find some difficulty and guidance from him, I will surely talk to him. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nagendra, sir. Yeah, thank you.
So my thankfulness to all of you, gratitude to Professor Dwivedi and IIT Tirupati for giving me this opportunity. I always love to talk with people and especially the kindred souls like you. And had it been a physical interaction, certainly it could have given us much more. But nonetheless, the times we are living in, this is the best we can do. And so whatever Professor Dwivedi has dared to organize such an event at such a time, so all credit to him and his team. So thank you very much for making it possible and making me a part of this. I look forward to interact with all the friends who have joined. You can just drop me an email if you have any concerns.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Further our relationship. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Clap for Prabha, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So we'll meet at 11:15 for the other session with Professor Rodney from IIT Guwahati. I'm ending the session now. Yeah, Pankaj, end the session now.
Yeah.